Good morning, everyone. My name is Nishanti Nehru, and I'm the founder, director, and lawyer at Nehru Law Professional Corporation. I would like to invite you to this webinar series, I apologize early for my voice. And if I start coughing, I did lose my voice last week. So at this time, I'm trying my best to actually maintain the voice. But as you know, sometimes it just doesn't work very well, even if you try. So let's start our webinar. Today's webinar, welcome to the Not-for-Profit Corporation formation in Canada. Okay, and just a little bit about me. My name is Nishanti Nehru. I have extensive legal experience in family law, civil litigation, and criminal court. And I've worked in various roles over the years, helping clients navigate complex legal challenges within the legal field. My years of experience are over 8 years. I've worked with judges, justices, lawyers, legal staff, as well as other individuals, including staff members and the public. So I have a lot of experience dealing with customer service, client relations, as well as dealing with legal areas and legal practices. So, what is a not-profit corporation? So, non-profit corporation operates for charitable, educational, or social purposes. So, this means a non-profit corporation is legally registered for charitable, educational, or social purposes rather than profit making. Unlike businesses, nonprofit have no shareholders or personal ownership. They reinvest profit into their mission, can apply for tax exempt status if eligible. However, remember that not all nonprofits are registered. So it really depends on the type of nonprofit you're actually running at this time. A nonprofit organization is solely it's not owned. It's usually members of the community or a like-minded organization that comes together, including like you can get soccer clubs, you can get entertainment clubs, you can get all different types of sports clubs, as well as charitable organizations and entertainment. Like if you are running an organization that is nonprofit and you want to do entertainment, where you want to do a roller skating entertainment club, you can do that as a nonprofit. You would be, though, you would need to be able to justify the reasons why it's a nonprofit. And there are purposes for each of these clubs. However, let's start off by how we actually establish a nonprofit organization. First, you can incorporate federally or provincially. Usually, federally means all over Canada, and you can practice all around Canada. That means you might have memberships in different organizations within the different provinces, but are a federal organization. These include like lawyers, law associations, and other individuals who are also nonprofit sometimes. And they actually have memberships and members who participate in these organizations. And federal operates it has a greater name protection. So that means that you literally would not have to establish your organization in every province, although it would sometimes be required depending on what context of municipality or provincial organization you're working with. To, let's say you're establishing a building and you need to register the building. So these are things you need to consider. So remember, when you're having these organizations, you might have subchapters who require specific types of memberships and require specific types of registration. Provincially, they're limited to one province, lower compliance requirements. So the requirements in nonprofit organizations can be less than higher than the federal nonprofit organizations. And remember that name protection only within the province. So when you register within the province, you are only going to be able to practice within the province. You can't go as a nonprofit and practice in another province if you actually registered in one province, unless you get a registration compliance in the other province. So the nonprofit in Canada is registered usually under the Canadian Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. That's NFP Act. And the Ontario one is registered under the Ontario Corporate Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. So please review these please review these acts before you actually proceed with actually preparing a not-for-profit corporation, because there might be regulatory requirements that you might have to meet and you have to adhere to. These are important and should be always reviewed before you actually continue your not-for-profit corporations. And also consult with a lawyer, because they will be able to assist you on many of these aspects of creating the not-for-profit corporations. And it might actually give you an ease of reference, especially if you have to create certain specific regulatory requirements, and as well as adhere to specific statutes. And sometimes you might have to create bylaws. But let's go to the next slide and see what's the benefits of incorporating a not-for-profit. So, benefits of incorporating a non-for-profit: you get limited liability, protects directors from personal liability. This is important because you are when you're creating a not-for-profit, it is a membership-based organization, as in the members elect directors to actually deal with the organization's day-to-day activities and any other requirements. That's also handling funds and other issues like registering the building permits and any other requirements. So these individuals can become liable depending on the act and the type of responsibility they are incurring. In this instance, you will have limited liability, but at the same time, please make sure that you're following the regulatory requirements. Because if you're not, like if you're filing specific tax exemptions requests, you might need to make sure that it applies within the not-for-profit organization and that you're dealing with it in a proper way. Credibility and trust, more attractive to donors, funders, and the public. So if you register, it's actually much better for your members and any individual donors and funders to be able to feel secure in their providing funds to you, as well as you can give them exemption sheets in some instances and invoices so that they can actually use it for their tax purposes. Legal recognitions, establish the organization as a separate entity. This helps the organization be able to operate even if the members are, the directors are no longer there, and you have members who are willing to elect further directors or treasurers or other members of the organization. So it helps that identity to continue even if the directors either pass away or the directors have other illnesses and are not able to continue. These are things that should be considered when you're actually dealing with a not-for-profit organization. Tax benefits. Usually, tax benefits are there for a not-for-profit, but you may need to show that you are registered and incorporated, so that the CRA will permit that tax exemptions for any kind of fees and invoices that the organization pays on behalf of the memberships, and as well as on behalf of any property they own or any kind of facilities they run. Fundraising opportunities. Many grants and donations require incorporation. So remember, if you need further funding for your not-for-profit, it's actually beneficial for you to have it incorporated. Otherwise, the government fundings are not as available to you as the as a not-for-profit that's not registered. And this is important because sometimes not-for-profits don't have enough fundings on a regular basis, and they need to actually request it from different entities or different organizations. And these organizations require registration before they can actually provide donations, including the government and other fundraisers. Okay. So, why choose a unique name? This is important because it is an incorporation. So, under the incorporations, you do need to have a very unique name, because if you are not able to establish a unique name, the nuance search that comes up will not permit you to actually register the organization as a not for profit organization. And this will allow you to actually be able to establish your organization as separate and a incorporation that is actually a separate entity, which is important because a not-for-profit corporation should be a separate entity, and it should be registered so the members don't become liable for their actions, or if there is an incidence of, let's say, a lawsuit of some sort, you might become liable personally as members, rather than the incorporation being an entity that is actually being sued, the entity being sued as a separate individual than the members itself. Okay. Now let's go to articles of incorporation. So this must be filed if you're incorporating your not-for-profit organization. However, there's strict rules in this specific structure that is supposed to be included within the filing of the articles of incorporation. Legal documents defining the organization's purpose is must. It is a must. That means there is guidelines for a registration of purposes. That means, how do I explain this? Is if you think about it, there is a specific type of organization. Let's say you're in a social club. A social club, sorry, excuse me, please. A social club can be a soccer team or a entertainment club. And these kind of entertainment clubs have a specific type of mission statements and specific type of purposes. And that is why you have to look up the guideline for the Ontario, or if you're doing the federal government purposes. My apologies. And in order to look at the purposes, there are guidelines on not-for-profit purposes on the government websites that can be accessed very easily. There are documents that indicate each type of different organization, so that you can actually assist in the creating the purposes and establishing them on your articles of incorporation. Includes so this includes directors and members. So in this instance, you would have to put in the directors at the time of establishing the incorporation. You would have to indicate who the directors are. Usually, you cannot have less than 3 members in most not-for-profit organizations. Sorry, 3 directors in not-for-profit organizations. So make sure when you're establishing a not-for-profit organization, you do have 3 members and who can be directors, and at least one person has to be the general member who can actually deal with all the elections and be able to get the rules for meetings and governance established, who can actually govern these issues within the not-for-profit. So these are requirements as per the Not-for-Profit Organizations Act, like Not-for-Profit Act, sorry, which has to be established within the Articles of Incorporation. So, as I indicated, in the Articles of Incorporation, you'll have directors. However, When you're establishing the not-for-profit organization, you might have a meeting of 3 people and say, "Hey, we're all going to be directors. Let's establish a not-for-profit and create a not-for-profit." That's perfect at the beginning. However, when you start the process, you will need to create bylaws. Bylaws? What are bylaws? Bylaws establish how elections are actually done within the memberships. So, who is allowed to vote? How many members need to be a quorum? How many members need to create that quorum that will allow for the vote to occur? This is important because if you're electing a member to be a director, you would want to make sure that there is a high number of quorum in the members to be able to elect that elect that member as director. Because if there isn't enough quorum, sometimes the vote will go un, unanswered, and you'll have to continue to do it again until all the members come to the meeting to be able to have that quorum, to be able to elect that member to be a director. So these are important factors because in the bylaws itself, it'll have how the membership structure is actually established. So, is there a vice president? Is there a president? The directors can exist as established. However, you want to have the vice president, the president, and you want to have treasurers, individuals, accountants, and you want to have other members who are able to fill these roles. These are important because these roles will establish how the organization is run. And in the bylaws, it also includes how the the roles will be effective and what their responsibilities are and how conflict resolution is established. It is important to have these things in the bylaws so that because it's a membership organization and it's not an actual organization controlled by shareholders. You don't have shareholders who are continually established by their purchase into the incorporation, which is a different situation altogether. But in this specific incorporation, the not-for-profit incorporation, you have members who will not be able to just pick a person to be established as a president unless it's incorporated and you're just actually establishing the organization. Once an organization is continually going on for a long period of time, you will have a lot of members. You may have small member groups, or you may have about 1,000 member groups. So you'll have to establish a specific set of structures and rules, and what the type of roles and responsibilities are, and who can fill them, and what requirements they need to have to fill those roles, and who can be elected into those positions, and how the election process is actually established. These are important because it actually creates the essential not-for-profit organization, and it also makes sure that you create liabilities that are only specific to specific roles, and that each role is actually um, you make sure that sorry, my apologies. You make sure that the individuals are responsible for specific tasks, and that there is no issues in the long term, especially when it comes to lawsuits. These directors or the role as a president can create a lawsuit and can actually establish who's responsible and what roles they played and how they affect these lawsuits. And this is important in the long run, especially if you're creating a not-for-profit that is a member base that grows in over time. Registration for a business number and tax accountants. So, obtain a business number from the Canada Revenue Agency. Technically, this is something that you can do after you create the not for profit. So, in CRA, you're supposed to file specific tax forms that will allow you to actually establish the not-for-profit once it's registered. But you don't have to do that until 6 months after you establish the not-for-profit organization. And once you've established it, after 6 months, you file your materials, you file your CRA forms that is required by the not-for-profit requirement under the CRA. And then you get tax deductions or tax exemptions depending on the situation. And you will be, at that time, a GST HST will be sent to you indicating that this is your GST HST. So you do not have to actually do this. This is not a requirement, but if you want to have tax deductions in your organization, and if you want to continue to be able to be self-sufficient, especially since not-for-profits actually are relying on member fundings as well as donations, you might want to show these tax receipts to your members and as well as the public. So these are things that are to be considered in the long term. You can also, this is an optional category because applying for charitable status is a bit more complicated. I would speak to a lawyer in doing in actually preparing the charitable application. This, you must apply for charitable status with the CRA to issue tax deduction donation receipts. So these are important if you are like taking a lot of donations from external sources when you're doing fundraisings and stuff. So you want to be able to make sure that you actually are giving individuals who are donating large sums of funds to your organization to be able to give them to tax deductions. In this instance, if your organization grows to an extent where you think that it is important to have the not-for-profit tax deduction receipts to be able to be given to your donors, then this would be very important. But this is a complex process, which would be required for you. It would be essential that you actually contact and speak to a lawyer in preparing these documents so that you have you have secured your long-term requirements, and you've also made sure that you adhere to all the charitable requirements, because it does become complicated in the long term. Obtain necessary licenses and permits. This is important because if you're, let's say you're running a soccer not-for-profit organization where you have members who are soccer sports individuals who want to have a building where they can play soccer in. Now that building requires a permit. It requires specific licenses that might be necessary, but as a not-for-profit, you would have to pay for it. You would have to fill out the organization, the municipality's requirements. If it's in Toronto, let's just say you have specific municipal requirements that would have to adhere to their municipal regulations, and you would have to follow all of the mandatory requirements. You would have to file an application with all the director's informations, and you would have to make sure that everything is properly done, and that you're not like, if you're not allowed alcohol in that premises, then I would suggest making sure that that is a permit that you actually obtain. If you're planning to do entertainment within that organization, if you're doing other kind of venues, you might want to make sure that the venues music is one of them. You might have to make sure that the music requirements are actually not over the limit, and you get a permit for that. So these are things that you must consider, like gaming and lottery license. If you're conducting a mini casino to raise funds for a not-for-profit organization, you might need to get those licenses in order to be able to allow you to actually do the gaming conventions, and also lottery licenses. So think about these before you actually start your not-for-profit, and what kind of organization you're actually going to run, and how what type of services you're going to provide. And if you are sorry I'm still getting over a cold, so please excuse me every time I cough. But yeah, make sure you actually look into all of these details before you start your not for profit and any kind of um, fundraising activity. So, financial responsibilities and tax responsibilities. You are required to file annual financial statements and filings. Some not for profit file T4, T2 corporate tax returns, compliance. So, these are the compliance with federal or provincial laws as required. Think about your not for profit. Does it hire individuals? Do you have to pay for these individuals? Are they volunteers? Do you have any costs associated with the not for profit? If you do, it would be important to consult with a tax accountant to determine what kind of consequences you have and what you should be filing in case it's necessary for you to be able to continue operating your not for profit. Compliance and governance best practices. Hold regular board meetings and maintain records. This is essential. Make sure you have a minute book. Make sure you have all of your information, your articles of incorporation, your filing requirements, your bylaws, if you have an HR manual, if you have any kind of conflict resolution process, if you have specific tax forms, all of these information, your accounts receivables, your these are important to keep and maintain within your minute books. Even if you're not a corporation, you will have to act like a corporation. Although you won't have shareholders, you won't have individuals who are actually um, paying into the funds or investors into the organization. You have members. Members will have the right to ask you questions about what you have done. If you are a director, or if you are a president, a vice president, a treasurer, the members have the right to look through your books to see if there's any issues. So board meetings will help provide these clarifications, any accounts that are occurring within that organization, any fundraising, how the money is being distributed, how the invoices are being sent out, if you're doing any fundraising, how much money you've actually obtained from those fundraising, and how these monies are being kept in the accounts, how there any kind of fees that are being paid out. These are things that the board members have the right to ask and understand how it's being distributed, because they are paying fees on a yearly basis to be able to be members of the organization. So here's a case study that goes through the specific issues that members would actually have to look at, and not-for-profits would have to know. Rexdale Singh Sabha Religious Center and Chata. Background: a governance dispute arose in a not-for-profit or due to a lack of proper record keeping and elections. See, you might have to look into making sure that you're keeping records of every single member meetings, and as well as having an individual who takes notes to make sure that these notes are kept on a regular basis in order to understand if there was any issues. Because the court ruled in this case that the Ontario Court of Appeal ruled that the original directors remained legally in place, emphasizing the importance of strict corporate governance. In this case, always hold elections, document meetings, and establish bylaws to prevent legal disputes. This is important because in the consequence of any lawsuit, any member who brings a lawsuit against the organization will be looking at the books. Even the courts will be looking at the books, meaning the minute books that keep all these information in detail. A minute book is it could be a binder, it could be a computerized minute book, but it keeps all of your articles of incorporation, your establishing organization, your bylaws, your HR manuals, your liabilities, your insurance information, also election processes, who was elected, how many votes, how was it conducted, what type of elections are allowed, how do meetings occur, when are meeting notices provided, when do these individual meetings occur, and are they required by the bylaws, what is the meeting requirements by the bylaws. So make sure you keep this minute book at a secure location. If it's a position where the incorporation has an office, keep it in a secure location in that office and make sure it's updated on a regular basis so that if anything comes out like a lawsuit, you have the ability to be able to go to this lawsuit. Go to this minute book and obtain the documents you need to be able to provide to the courts or to your members to satisfy their requirements. This is another case law that is very important. Warriors of the Cross Asian Church and Messiah. Sorry, I might not be saying that properly. Okay, so a governance dispute arose in a not-for-profit religious organization due to the unclear membership qualification and an invalid election process. The court, in this case, the Ontario Superior Court, ruled that the election was invalid due to procedural flaws and non-compliance with the Ontario Corporations Act. The court ordered that the dissolution of the corporation due to unworkable governance. So this is why you need to have clear outlined bylaws. Bylaws always establish clear bylaws because they always give you the proper election procedures and maintain legal compliance to avoid governance failures. In these bylaws, you have to make sure that you actually state what the quorum should be. That means the amount of members that are required to be present during an election, as well as what the quorum establishes is that who can be like what is the requirements of the election voting process. So even if you have members, are they members, full members who are able to elect and vote, or are they partial members who are family members or members of the family members? Sorry, family members of the members. That's very confusing. But you have to make sure you establish these issues in the bylaws so that you know what the voting requirements are. The quorum sets out the voting requirements as okay, these members have to be in, if there is like 300 members, then 75% of those members have to be in the quorum to be able to elect. That is the requirement. Whereas the membership requirement is okay, are they full members, partial members, or just individuals who are in the quorum, in the meeting at the time when this quorum is occurring. So make sure you establish these requirements because when you do, it'll allow you to vote accurately and provide proper elections and allow the elections to proceed with no flaws and members who are elected into the positions of vice president, president, and other roles such as treasurers and secretaries will allow them to be effective and continue their roles properly. Common challenges in running a not-for-profit. Lack of funding and sustainability requires strategic planning. So You could always charge membership fees for your members, but you have to allow your organization to establish that at the beginning. Otherwise, if you get to the middle and indicate, oh, let's start charging membership fees, then you'll need to bring in an election to determine whether or not this is appropriate. These kind of changes need to be made in a group, especially if it's changing the bylaws in the specific membership allowances. And so make sure that you have a strategic planning for fundraising and donations, and how it'd be effective to assist the not-for-profit organization. Governance issues, board conflicts can disrupt operations. So how do you deal with conflict issues within the membership, and how do you actually deal with the process of making sure that you have a conflict resolution in process? Conflict resolution set up. This should be done within the bylaws. It'll allow the bylaws to be established in a proper way that will allow the board to, either the members can vote on the conflict issues, or you can create a bylaw that will allow that if it's directors, how many directors and are able to decide in the conflict. So if it's like 5 directors, then how many amount of directors have to agree to deal with like it's a voting requirements within those directors. Overcoming challenges and solutions and strategies. Diversify funds, seek grants, donations, and sponsorships. Strong leaderships, recruit skilled and dedicated directors. This is important because make sure that they understand their responsibilities. Because if they're not understanding their responsibilities on how to manage the funds, how to deal with memberships, how to deal with building or permits or licenses, then you're going to have a lot of issues when it comes to long-term um, long-term issues, such as like lawsuits where you might have someone suing you for damages or injuries on the property. So these are things that must be made aware to the directors, and have directors who know what they're dealing with. Stay compliant. Follow all legal and financial reporting requirements. Fundraising and grant opportunities. So there's a lot of fundraising and grant opportunities in Canada for not-for-profits. You can look into them. These are things that you should be looking into their websites. Most likely, check the government websites, because Canada Heritage, Employment and Social Development Canada have grant opportunities for not-for-profit organizations. Private foundation funding. So McConnell Foundation is an example. So you can actually set up if you have funds and you want to set up a not-for-profit and you want to do let's say scholarship funds. These are things that you could think about. What is the possibility of getting these funds within the organization? And community fundraising and crowdfunding. So these are things that you can look into, but make sure you adhere to the permits and licenses when you're actually doing these fundraisings. The role of volunteers in not-for-profit. Volunteers help reduce costs and increase engagement. Strong volunteer management ensures long-term success. So there's always opportunities to gain volunteers who could eventually become members as well. So in this instance, you could have members who are volunteering on their capacity as members and volunteers to be able to assist in the organization. Key takeaway: choose the right incorporation level, federal or provincial. Follow legal steps, name registration, incorporation, bylaws, and tax filings. Ensure strong governance, transparent decision making, and compliance. Plan for long-term sustainability through fundraising and strategic planning. So make sure you deal with these first before you actually even establish a not-for-profit, because in the long run, you may have legal consequences, and you will have to, it'll cost you a lot more to be able to go to a lawyer to be able to establish and deal with these issues. And this is important because this will protect you from all the liabilities. Finally, incorporating a non-for-profit is a decisive step towards making an impact to ensure success, ensure compliance, governance, and financial planning. Thank you. And if you have any questions, please email me regarding this. I have assisted several not for profit organizations, and I do understand that there are some consequences that must be looked at, and you might want to make sure that everything is adhered to before you even establish an organization, as well as sometimes there is no there's nothing you can do if you establish the organization and it does become difficult afterwards. At that point, you will still have to contact a lawyer to be able to make sure that you can fix the issues and be able to handle the not-for-profit, and that there is no further lawsuits or legal consequences to you or to the directors or members. These are important things to consider, okay? And thank you so much for joining for our free webinar. Hopefully, you'll join us on Friday for insurance liability and partnerships. Okay, thank you.